Polestar's first fully electric volume model, the Polestar 2, is a premium performance fastback EV that delivers a very Swedish-style alternative in the segment for compact to mid-sized electric models. Its style is individual, its driving dynamics claim to be surprising, and its core values are right on point for these enviro-conscious times.
The Polestar 2 is this fresh Swedish EV brand's most important model. It's a high-quality sporting EV, a rare and rather unique 5-door hatch with quality, handling and battery technology all benchmarked against the best that the premium segment competition can offer. And we're going to test it. You may be vaguely aware of the Polestar brand as Volvo's luxury platform for uniquely designed sporting electric models. Every premium marque makes an EV these days, of course, but many of them merely feel like battery-powered versions of existing cars. For an early adopter to plug-in motoring, there is an undeniable appeal in the clean sheet approach which segment originator Tesla's products bring to the table. Now, Polestar aims to deliver that, but combine it with the depth of engineering that you get from a more established manufacturer. Its first product was the Polestar 1, a beefy luxury GT coupe, which was a plug-in hybrid and came with a hefty £140,000 price tag. The model we look at here, though, the Polestar 2, is much more like it, a full EV priced more accessibly from around £40,000 and aimed directly at cars like BMW's i4 and sportier versions of the Tesla Model 3. For all this car's Scandinavian vibe, in reality, it's China's entry into this exploding segment. This model is built and bankrolled there by Geely, who not only also own Volvo, but Lotus, Proton, and the SUV maker Lynk & Co. Mind you, it's also very much an international product. The battery modules are from LG Chem in South Korea, the electric motors come from Siemens in Germany, and the brand has a research and development facility in Coventry. The Polestar 2 first arrived in mid-2020 in twin motor form, but we've waited a little to test it so as to be able to analyse the whole range, which was expanded in 2021 to include the more affordable single motor variants that you're more likely to want. Almost everything a conscientious EV adopter might want is promised here. Decent driving range, sustainable manufacturing, a vegan interior, and more than a dash of cutting-edge technology too. This was the first model in the world to feature an infotainment system that's powered by Google's Android Automotive operating system. Now that claims to redefine what you can expect from in-car infotainment and connectivity. Which all sounds quite promising, but every new premium EV seems intriguing these days. What makes this one different? Well, you'll need the industry's most comprehensive test, this car and driving review, to find out. We get the Polestar concept, creation of electric cars for the kind of driver who would normally choose a conventional premium sports saloon. But as such a customer, you might understandably have a few qualms about choosing such a thing from a subsidiary of the Volvo marque, a maker yet to deliver any sort of enthusiast-orientated product, and a brand which has recently announced its intention to limit the top speed of all its cars to 112 miles an hour. News that this Polestar 2 is based around the stodgy underpinnings of the Volvo XC40 might also be discouraging if you like your driving. But give this Sino-Scandinavian model a chance and go and try one. If you do and get yourself behind the wheel, you'll find that, like so many EVs these days, there's no keyhole, no starter button. In fact, there's no ignition sequence of any kind. Instead, once you're comfortably ensconced on this vegan upholstery here, you merely knock the curiously fashioned central gear selector back twice into D with your foot on the brake, and off you go, rather rapidly. It's difficult to imagine how quickly this car would spear away from rest if it didn't weigh as much as a Range Rover. Okay, you might not find the electrified rush as satisfying as the combustion thrust that you might be used to, but at least in this case it's delivered as part of a car that feels as if it has proper automotive genes rather than being merely the product of a tech company. You definitely wouldn't think you were driving any kind of Volvo, even though this car shares not only its CMA platform, but also all its powertrains with an electric XC40, which is an SUV like the Chinese Lynk & Co 01, another Geely Group model which uses the same engineering. Without that crossover class all-steel chassis, this model would probably sit a bit closer to the ground and with a few less kilos to carry around too, and it'd obviously be a better driver's car as a result. Certainly setting off with a 200 kilo weight disadvantage over a rival Tesla Model 3 isn't a particularly good start. Plus this car does without the dynamic driving modes and the pretended engine noises favoured by most of its direct rivals. Is it really serious then about being sporty? The answer is yes, but this Polestar goes about its business with a deeper and more considered sense of purpose. Roll is restricted, the steering is accurate, and your slightly raised driving position offers a feeling of proper command. And with a top long-range dual-motor 78 kWh battery model we've chosen to test here, cornering grip is rarely lacking thanks to two AC synchronous 150 kilowatt electric motors, one for each pair of wheels, offering all-wheel drive traction and a combined 408 horsepower. That's enough to deliver 660 Newton meters of pulling power, and that's more torque than you get from a Nissan GT-R supercar, and a rest to 62 time of 4.7 seconds en route to 127 miles an hour. You can also embellish this top powertrain with a motorsport orientated performance pack that'll give you track-ready Brembo brakes, stickier Continental Sport Contact tyres, and race-style Öhlins dual-flow valve manually adjustable dampers, all of which ought to deliver pretty much all the sporting focus that you might want. Even rather too much of it for a typical likely owner who'll be more concerned with nitrous oxide emissions than with the Nürburgring. It's for these people that Polestar has introduced two front-mounted single-motor variants of this car. If you're one of those folk, then you're probably going to ideally want the mid-level 231 horsepower long-range single-motor model. That gets the same 78 kilowatt-hour LG Chem battery pack as a top version, but it's paired to one 170 kilowatt motor on the front axle. Because in this form the car doesn't have to carry around a weighty rear axle motor, it's able to improve this dual motor derivative's fairly unremarkable 298 mile driving range to a more Tesla-like 335 mile figure. Final option is the Polestar 2 in base 224 horsepower standard range single motor form, which uses a smaller 64 kilowatt hour battery mated to a 165 kilowatt front motor and offers a range of up to 273 miles. Whatever your choice of powertrain, setting the drive format to suit your personal preferences couldn't be much easier, and that's thanks to the drive section of this huge central screen here. Now, if you share our view that the precise steering also has a rather gloopy feel, then you want to fiddle with the three provided rack settings, light, standard and firm. Now the last of these is of course best for fast secondary road use, at which point you might also like the provided one pedal drive brake regeneration system in its most abrupt standard setting. Now that slows the car when you come off throttle for a bend, rather like it might if you change down a gear at corner entry with a combustion model. Now for suburban use with one pedal drive set at standard, you will really hardly ever have to use the actual brake pedal, except when of course you're coming to a complete stop. But if you don't like that kind of regenerative feel, as you might not for example at highway speeds, then low or even off regen screen settings are also available. The same drive display offers a less intrusive sport mode for the stability system and the option to replicate the creep at idling speeds that you'll get from a conventional auto gearbox. What else? Well, if you've opted for this long-range dual motor model with the optional performance pack that we just mentioned, as up to a third of owners apparently do incidentally, you'll need to accept a rather firm ride from the bigger 20-inch wheels that you have to have, unless those Öhlins dual flow valve dampers are switched right out to their softest setting. Now that's not easy because to adjust those, you have to put the car up onto a ramp, you have to remove the rear wheel arch liners and scramble about beneath it. What's all that about? I mean, we've had dashboard mounted adjustable damping for what, half a century now? The regular dampers you get with standard cars like this one, they're sourced from Öhlins parent company Tenneco, aided by more suburban friendly 19-inch wheel rims, make the ride over poorer surfaces rather more assured, although the nastier tarmac tears can still catch it out. All of which leaves us, well, where? I mean, with a car that's significantly quicker than a comparably priced BMW i4 and which is more engaging than a Tesla Model 3 or any full electric SUV. Even without those advantages, we'd see a bright future for this curiously appealing contender. It's perfectly tuned for mid-level executive motoring in this new post-pandemic zeitgeist. At the wheel, this just doesn't feel like a first-time effort from a fledgling brand, but a mature, richly engineered design that's ready to reward a more intelligent take on this rapidly diversifying segment. This might even be a class benchmark, although you would need to try an i4 just to be sure. Either way, the Polestar brand is demanding to be taken seriously. As a car maker, Polestar has an intrinsically deep relationship with Volvo, and so does this Polestar 2. Back in 2016, this design was originally a Volvo concept car, the Concept 40.2, but when Polestar's styling chief Maximilian Missoni saw it, he recognised in the chiseled look a shape that was ready to pioneer the style of an entirely new brand. This may be the second car the company has made, but it's the first true Polestar. The tall, chunky proportions certainly couldn't be more different from the sleek, globular shape of a rival Tesla. In fact, it doesn't really look like anything else at all, which is what you might most like about it. In theory, it is a 5-door fastback, but it sits on the compact modular architecture platform of a Volvo XC40 SUV, hence the high-sided look which Polestar likes to describe with words like urban and robotic. Not all of it works. We think Missoni and his team might want to take a second stab at this front grille, which one writer likened to a cheap camping mat left out in the mud at Glastonbury. We'd expected that the brand would want to create its own illuminating signature for the LED headlamps rather than borrow this Thor's hammer design from Volvo. These corner fog lamps come as part of an optional pilot's pack. From the side, you might consider that the 2.7 metre wheelbase is rather too short for the 4.6 metre body length, and adding this rather cheap looking battery output sticker behind the front wheel arch is unnecessary, but the profile's lovely. It's embellished by blacked out windscreen pillars which flow into the cantilevered roof. Add in lustrous paintwork, tight shut lines and well-proportioned 19-inch, as in this case, or 20-inch wheels, and the stamp of visual quality needed for this Sino-Scandinavian battery hot rod to take on the premium badged establishment is assured. The rear perspective is equally arresting, with strips of LED lighting that curl around the lower tailgate like Salvador Dali's moustache, while lower down, just about the only chrome embellishment you'll see anywhere on this car is found around these rear reflectors. Getting in and activating the car requires nothing more than you should have the key in your pocket, but it's a rather cheap looking square black thing, so you might prefer instead to download the appropriate Polestar app so the whole entry and start thing can be handled by your smartphone instead. It's a vegan interior apparently, and if you don't happen to be a vegan, you may view the prospect of that with all the enthusiasm that you might muster for a trip to your local meat-free restaurant. But actually, once you're inside, well, it's all rather nice, providing you happen to like the whole pared back Scandinavian vibe that this car wants to draw you into. Trimming touches like grey fabric door and dash inserts and this charcoal headliner make it all rather dark and sombre unless you spend a very large amount of extra money on a fancy beige leather and brown wood trimming pack. Austerity emphasised by the almost complete lack of button clutter and a general reluctance to feature the kind of chrome and silver trimming which you would normally expect to find on a premium brand model at this price point. You might also miss the sheer theatre of a rival Tesla Model 3's enormous central touchscreen, although the one on offer here is hardly any smaller. And importantly, unlike with that American EV, you don't have to look at it for instrument readouts because these are provided via a further 12.3-inch binnacle display that you view through this 3-spoke steering wheel. Given Polestar's Volvo ancestry, the need for cost-saving shared componentry at this price point, and perhaps the fact that Polestar CEO Thomas Ingenlath used to be head of Volvo design, you would expect quite a few carryover parts from the Gothenburg brand, but actually all of that's quite well disguised. The steering wheel switches, the stalks and the climate vents are just as you'd find on the kind of comparable Volvo S60 that quite a few customers might otherwise have chosen, but these are things that really didn't need changing. More importantly, the things that you interact with, like this curiously shaped gear lever here and the screen graphics, they're all bespoke. And the overall feeling is of a cabin that, rather refreshingly, isn't derivative of anything else in the segment. There are just 3 buttons for demist, the heated windscreen and the hazard flashers inserted into this shiny piano black panel at the base of the centre stack here. These are grouped around this thankfully physical volume control dial for the 11.15-inch central screen above, which we should brief you on a bit more because you're going to be using this an awful lot. This was the first car in the world to feature an infotainment system that's powered by Google's Android Automotive operating system, which integrates Google Assistant, Google Maps and the Google Play Store, everything loading just as it would on an Android phone handset, although Apple devices can also be accommodated. You can't watch Netflix or play computer games as you could on a rival Tesla screen, but apparently Polestar is working on that. And what we've got here overall is one of the very best cabin monitors we've ever tried in a car of any price, with brilliantly intuitive built-in voice control, a speciality. One potential issue is the way that this display has been saddled with taking care of all the climate system controls, not something we'd normally want, but it actually works quite well in this case. Whatever you're doing on this monitor, you merely touch this lower virtual button here for ventilation functions to appear at the bottom of the layout, which then returns to a simple home screen you can configure into 4 sections. We've got maps, phone, driver performance, efficiency readouts and radio, for example, here. Along the top of this monitor are your primary access icons for the main menus you'll be using. The key ones are in the middle, car and this Windows icon. Car connects you through to a choice of 4 sections, drive being the first of these, and that allows you to set up steering feel, transmission creep, stability intervention and the car's one-pedal drive system. Next in the car menu is an assist section dealing with camera safety stuff. Thirdly, you've got a charging area covering battery use and charge settings. And finally, there's a more screen which accommodates service info. Move your finger back to the top of the screen and across to the Windows section, and you'll find yourself in an area of the monitor that deals with connectivity and route guidance. Again, there are 4 options. There's Google Maps, your phone settings, media features, and the Google Assistant section. Now that is where those drive performance energy readouts reside. Everything else you'll need can be found on Polestar's so-called progressive instrument binnacle display that you view through this vegan leather-stitched wheel with its squarical Polestar branded central boss here. The drive for simplicity features here too, with just 2 viewing options based around one basic layout, all of it accessible via this button on the right-hand steering wheel spoke. The standard one sees navigation directions flanked by a digital speedo on the left, while a battery readout with a power and charge indicator features on the right. All that happens if you press the view button is that the left and right speed and battery readouts shrink to accommodate a central nav section, which expands into an almost full screen map. Everything's clear and concise and easy to read at a glance. What else? Well, there'll be a light and airy cabin feel if you've added in this lovely fixed panoramic glass roof, which has classy branding at its leading edge, but lacks a retracting cover because embedded UV ray tinting makes one unnecessary. Your frontward vision is fine thanks in part to the slightly raised driving position here that's conferred on this car by its SUV-style CMA platform. Your view towards the back is much less satisfactory thanks to a small rear screen, although so good is the rear camera system and the parking sensor setup that you won't really notice that as an issue too much. The seats, as usual on Swedish cars, are brilliantly supportive in all the right places, and you can have them trimmed in natural leather if you've got more to spend and you find yourself a bit fed up with the whole vegan vibe. Perhaps they could do with a fraction more in the side bolsters for really fast cornering though, but lumbar support, heating and semi-electric powered adjustability comes as standard, and they've been really nicely lined up with the pedals. Storage space provision isn't particularly exemplary. This box between the seats, the lid of which doubles as a slidable elbow rest, is mainly taken up by a second cup holder. The primary one lies just in front, where if it's used, your morning beaker of oat milk latte will rather get in the way of everything below the central screen. This stowage area at the base of the center stack offers a wireless charging mat and a couple of USB-C ports under little rubber covers. An overhead sunglasses compartment is missing, and the door bins aren't particularly big, but you do get little cubbies built into either side on the lower part of the center console, and the glove box with an integrated pen holder is gratifyingly big, although the level of give that you get from its lid when it's open betrays the influence of corporate bean counters, as does the flex in this protruding panel below the Polestar roof logo. Otherwise though, build quality from the Chinese Lequao factory near Shanghai seems reasonable, and what's lacking in comparison to, say, Audi is made up for by little touches. The lovely soft plink, plink, plink of the indicators, for example. And of course, there's a warm glow of veganism in the knowledge that this cabin uses significantly less plastic, fewer environmentally nasty chemicals, and more recycled materials than other car interiors. Okay, time to take a look in the rear. Now the door opens nice and wide. And it shuts again with a quality thunk. But you're not going to want to share the rear part of this cabin with more than one other adult because of the protruding height of this central tunnel that you think this car wouldn't need because it doesn't have to house a conventional transmission system, but which is necessary here to house some of the lithium-ion battery cells positioned underneath you. In our view, you really need this panoramic roof to be included in your car's specification. The rear part of this cabin really would feel rather dark and grim back here without it, although the downside of having this glass ceiling is a slight lack of headroom, which you'll see the heads of lankier six-footers touching the panel above. Still, legroom is very reasonable by the usually relatively mediocre standards that pervade in this class. The optional Plus pack that gets you the panoramic roof also gives you heated seating and tinted windows back here. As for practicalities, well, the door bins, they're a reasonable size. Twin USB-C central ports are provided, and there are more coat hooks than you could possibly need on the B-pillars as well as on the overhead grab handles. The usual fold-down armrest has the usual twin open cup holders. There are individual LED reading lights on each side, and you get netted seat back pockets too. We'll finish by taking a look at the boot, the hatch for which, as you'd want, is power operated and embellished to standard with a swipe function, so you can wave your foot beneath the bumper like that and open it if you're approaching the car all laden down with bags. The capacity revealed, 364 litres, is some way down on what you get from a rival Tesla Model 3 at 542 litres, or something conventional like, say, a BMW 3 Series at 480. But those two cars are saloons, and this is a hatch, so here you get a more versatile loading space. Plus, because Polestar unfortunately doesn't include any kind of spare wheel, you are provided with this further deep 41 litre well beneath the floor. The usual little touches feature a 12-volt socket and elasticated strap on the left with a storage net on the right. There are 2 bag hooks and 4 tie-down points, along with a couple of LED lights and a further one on the inside of the tailgate. You also get a ski hatch to compensate for the conventional 60-40 rear seat back split. If you've specified the optional Plus pack we have here, you'll also have this cargo floor lid-in lid panel, so you can keep the mess from muddy boots out of sight and so out of mind. Or you might want to pull this panel up to keep bags in place. Push forward the rear bench and 1,095 litres of space is freed up. And we haven't finished yet, because like a few of its rivals, this EV also puts the freed up space beneath its bonnet to good use with a frunk. Now, unfortunately, unlike a Tesla Model 3, you can't fit a carry-on suitcase into it, but the 35 litre space provided here is large enough to store the charging cables. Everything about this Polestar 2 is pared down for simplicity, and you might be pleased to find that the same holds true when it comes to the model range and the options you can have. Now, at the time of this test in autumn 2021, the brand was publicising a base price of around £40,000 for the entry-level 64 kilowatt-hour standard range single motor model. From there, you add £3,000 to get the mid-level 78 kilowatt-hour long-range single motor version, and a further £3,000 to get the top 78 kilowatt-hour long-range dual motor four-wheel drive variant we're trying here. Many Polestar 2s are going to be acquired on lease contracts. To give you an idea of cost on that, a Polestar lease based around a 3-year, 10,000 mile contract with 12-month advance payment of £5,607 would, at the time of this test, cost from £467 a month, including VAT. All the variables around leasing figures are, of course, on the Polestar.com website. Now, we should also brief you on the manner in which you'll be able to buy or lease this car, because it won't ever be sold by conventional dealerships. Now, the closest the brand gets to that kind of thing is what it calls Polestar Spaces. Now, these are basically automotive department stores in shopping centres. Now, at the time of this test in autumn 2021, there were only 2 of those. There's one at Westfield in London, and the other one is at the Trafford Shopping Centre in Manchester. Plus, Polestar does have a test drive hub in Milton Keynes, and it engages in short-term pop-up shopping spaces at malls around the country. The primary idea, though, is that you should place your order online via the British section of the Polestar.com website, and then connect into the brand as and when you need to. They'll come to you when your car needs servicing. You get 3 years of that, including the price. Right, yes, prices. Now, the ones we mentioned earlier pitch this car right into the heart of its intended segment. The figures give or take a couple of options, being pretty much what you'd need for sporty, futuristic-looking mid-sized EV models with similar pretensions, like Kia's EV6 and Hyundai's Ioniq 5. The asking prices also match what you'll need for the mainstream 75 kilowatt-hour standard range version of Ford's Mustang Mach-E, a car which, for more cash, can be kitted out with the kind of larger extended range battery that this Polestar can't offer. If you've been reading all the magazine reports on this Swedish contender, though, the rival that you'll probably most have in mind is Tesla's Model 3, which all those media outlets will tell you goes a lot further on each charge than a Polestar 2. Well, yes and no. A base standard range plus spec two-wheel drive Model 3 doesn't actually really go any further than a comparably priced base two-wheel drive Polestar 2 standard range single motor variant. And for just £2,000 more than that base Tesla, you could get yourself a Polestar 2 long range single motor variant that would take you 57 miles further than that base Tesla can go on each charge. When discussing driving range, the Model 3 variant that the magazines usually refer to is the dual motor all-wheel drive version, which does indeed have a useful 360-mile range. That's 62 miles more than the equivalent long-range dual-motor Polestar 2, the car that we have here in fact. But in that form, the Model 3 costs £2,500 more than this Polestar, so it really comes down to your priorities. If you're going to get into Tesla comparisons, then you could argue that the Model 3 is the wrong Tesla to pitch against here. This Polestar's hatch configuration makes it possibly a closer rival to the American brand's 5-door Model Y, which won't cost you much less than you'll need for this Swedish EV, and which has driving range figures more closely comparable to this Polestar. The other possible mid-sized rivals that you might want to look at, they're all overtly SUVs, and if you really wanted something like that, you might prefer instead to get yourself exactly the same engineering which is in use here, clothed beneath the panelwork of a comparably priced Volvo XC40 pure electric. Now that competes against aspirational mid-sized crossover EV models like Audi's Q4 e-tron, the Volkswagen ID4 and the Cupra Born. Now for reference, you would need to find around £15,000 more than Polestar requires for this top Polestar 2 if you're going to choose either an Audi e-tron Sportback in base 50 Quattro form or a BMW iX3, and around £20,000 more if you were to choose either a Mercedes EQC or a Jaguar I-Pace. If, having considered all those options, you conclude that it is a Polestar 2 that you really want, then you're going to need to know just how generous the brand has been with the standard specification. And here again, things are simple and straightforward, with one single standard specification applicable across the range. So let's brief you on that now. Adaptive LED headlights come as standard, along with Thor's Hammer daytime running lamps and this car's distinctive full LED rear light bar. Plus you also get 19-inch 5 V-spoke black diamond cut alloy wheels and a powered tailgate with hands-free operation, so you can open it with a swipe of your foot beneath the bumper if you're approaching the car all laden down with shopping bags. As you'd expect for the money here, the spec sheet runs to keyless entry, auto headlamps and wipers, all-round parking sensors, headlamp washers and a full range of camera safety kit. Now we're going to brief you on that in just a moment. As for EV stuff, well, the models all come with a 6-meter Type 2 Mode 3 charging cable, along with a 3-pin 7-meter Type 2 Mode 2 home charging cable. And you'll get a configurable one-pedal drive setup for the brake regeneration system too. Inside there's a huge 11.15-inch central display powered by Google's Android Automotive operating system, with Google built in and incorporating Google Assistant, Google Maps and Google Play Store. 3 years of Google service connectivity is included, and the system is constantly improved with over-the-air updates. There's smartphone mirroring for both Android and Apple phones, an 8-speaker 250-watt premium audio setup, and a 3D navigation system which can plot routes between charging points. Conventional instrument dials, they are replaced by a progressive 12.3-inch digital driver display screen. You also get cruise control, a frameless auto-dimming rear view mirror and rear view camera too. As for the seats, which in their standard form have embossed textile vegan upholstery, the front ones have heating and semi-electric powered adjustment with lumbar support, along with memory settings for the driver. As with every newly launched car these days, and particularly every EV, there's also a standard app. This one's called Polestar Connect, and you can use it to remotely check the charge level and service status of your car, or to log your journeys, including their start and end location, their distance and duration. Apart from that, the app also allows you to send destinations to the onboard navigation system and to sync appointments from your calendar too. You'll also want to download the separate digital key for Polestar app, which will allow you to unlock and start the car with your smartphone, and it works together with the main Polestar Connect app to make car sharing easier. Now, thanks to this, when Polestar come to collect your car for servicing, you won't actually ever need to give them the key. All you'll have to do is to authorize them via the app. Right, let's switch our focus to matters of safety, which, as you'd expect from a Volvo-derived product, is a key focus with this car, hence its 5-star Euro NCAP safety showing. Now, despite not having an internal combustion engine to help to absorb frontal impact in a crash, this electric Polestar 2 claims to be one of the safest cars in the class, which to some extent perhaps explains the extra weight this EV carries around compared to some of its direct rivals. Now, yes, its CMA platform is basically the same one that you'll find in a conventional petrol-powered Volvo XC40, but the engineers totally redesigned the front crash structure segment as part of the switch to use of this model's full EV powertrain, as well as designing a unique safety structure for occupants and battery. And as you'd expect, there's a wide range of camera safety features too. An autonomous braking system called collision avoidance and mitigation is of course standard fit, and this system can specifically detect people and cyclists. There's also an oncoming lane mitigation setup which not only stops you from pulling out into the path of an oncoming vehicle, but can also steer you away from such an impact. In addition, you get a driver alert system that warns of driver drowsiness, and a lane keeping aid which alerts you if you've drifted over the lane delineating lines and subtly steers the car back to where it ought to be. There is also run-off road protection and run-off road mitigation too. A road sign information display pictures speed signs as you pass them and then displays them on the dash, and the post-impact braking system brakes the car automatically after a crash, so it's less likely then to spin off and hit something else. We also like the connected safety setup. Now, that's a cloud-based system that keeps the Polestar 2 driver informed about road conditions and potential hazards along the route. Connected safety links Polestar and compatible Volvo cars, transmitting real-time information on vehicle behavior and external factors like weather and breakdowns or collisions involving other vehicles. As part of connected safety, a slippery road alert tells the driver if there's a risk of slippery driving conditions at the car's present position or on the road ahead. And a hazard light alert warns the driver if another connected Polestar or Volvo on the road has its hazard lights on ahead. Of course, you also get all the usual electronic assistance for braking, traction and stability control. Plus, there are the Volvo-developed WIPS front seat whiplash protection and SIPS side impact protection systems. And as you'd expect from a car of this price, there's a full complement of 8 airbags, including a full-length inflatable curtain and a driver's knee bag. Like all newly launched cars these days, there's also an e-call system which will see the emergency services advised of your exact location if the airbags are activated in an accident. Hill start assist, tyre pressure monitoring, ISOFIX child seat fastenings, a speed limiter and a first aid kit also make the team sheet. Like all EV makers, Polestar had to make this car safe for pedestrians too, who might not hear its near silent approach in urban conditions. So there's an acoustic vehicle alert system which generates subtle, recognisable sounds that help the car to make itself heard, warning folk on the pavement that you're about to pass. Okay, so we've covered everything you get as standard on a Polestar 2. Now let's look at options. On the mainstream models, your primary choice is between 2 extra cost packs. The Pilot pack, which is mainly concerned with visibility and safety and costs £3,000 more, and the Plus pack, which deals more with luxury features and costs £4,000 more. Let's start then with the Plus pack because nearly every Polestar 2 customer tends to want that. We've got it here. The Plus pack gives you a 600-watt Harman Kardon premium sound audio setup, while the seat upholstery is upgraded with a vegan weave tech finish. The front seats get full 4-way powered adjustment with a manual cushion extension, and there's heated seats in the back. There's a huge fixed panoramic roof with a projected Polestar symbol. There are tinted rear windows, a heated steering wheel, heated windscreen washer nozzles, an inductive phone charger, a high-level interior illumination, and a rear cargo floor lid-in lid panel so you can better deal with muddy boots. A final key part of the Plus pack is Polestar's clever heat pump, which reduces the need to use valuable battery capacity for preparing and sustaining the cabin climate. The heat pump system uses ambient heat as well as residual thermal energy from the drivetrain to reduce energy requirements for climate control by as much as 50%. In colder weather, and most effectively between 5 to 15 degrees Celsius, a range improvement of as much as 10% can be achieved by using that feature. Now let's consider the Pilot Pack, which, as I just mentioned, is there to give this car an enhanced package of safety and driver assistance features. Again, we have it here. You get more sophisticated pixel LED headlights with active bending and cornering light functions, plus LED front fog lights too, which also turn with the bends. There's also a 360-degree surround view camera, auto-dimming exterior mirrors, and special illuminating sequences for the front and rear lights. And the Pilot Pack also includes a limited amount of semi-autonomous driving tech, combining adaptive cruise control with the Volvo Pilot Assist setup, which at highway speeds can take care of braking and throttle control for you and also keep you in lane, providing you keep your hands on the steering wheel. Extra camera safety equipment included as part of the Pilot Pack includes a blind spot information system with steer assist setup, which warns you if you're just about to dangerously pull out in front of another vehicle and will apply steering assistance to ease you back to safety. Also included with the Pilot Pack is cross traffic alert, which will warn you of oncoming vehicles when you're reversing out of a space and is able to automatically brake the car if necessary to avoid a collision. There's additionally a rear collision warning and mitigation system which warns you of impending rear end collisions, and if one is inevitable, will take steps to mitigate the severity of the impact. And you get emergency stop assist, which if you're taken ill at the wheel and you can't operate the vehicle, will bring the car to a controlled stop. It's all very reassuring. The other available option pack can only be had with this top long-range dual-motor four-wheel drive model, the Performance Pack, which costs £5,000 more, and it proved particularly popular at the launch of this car when over a third of all customers ordered it. This performance-orientated pack gives you upgraded Brembo brakes with gold calipers, forged 20-inch alloy wheels with Stickier Continental Sport Contact 6 tyres and signature Swedish gold details inside and out, including gold seat belts, which sound a bit naff but actually look really nice. But the Performance Pack's main feature is a set of manually adjustable motorsport-derived Öhlins dampers. These drop ground clearance from 151mm to 146mm and offer 22 settings of adjustment, all of which have to be done with the car on a ramp because the dampers have to be adjusted with manual knobs that you'll find either on the bottom of the inverted front struts or hidden behind panels up inside the rear wheel arches. A Performance Pack equipped Polestar 2 will be supplied with these dampers in a mid-level but still rather stiff setting. You try it like that and then you tell Polestar if you'd like the dampers then tweaked for either firmness or comfort. So let's finish by looking at individual options you can order. There aren't too many. Metallic paint, a 20-inch alloy wheel upgrade and a tow bar, they're the main things. For the interior, you can add non-vegan full leather upholstery if you're a bit fed up with this car's stripped back Enviro vibe. And if you want to lift the rather dismal ambiance of the cabin and you don't mind forking out another £4,000, then you can specify barley brown coloured ventilated Napa leather upholstery combined with brown reconstructed wood deco trim. As for practical additions, you can add floor mats and a bespoke luggage compartment mat. There are also load carrying roof crossbars, child seats and an auto sock to go over the tyres for grip in snowy conditions. You're probably going to want to know about driving range first and foremost. Now we've already given you the figures for the various Polestar 2 models in our driving experience section earlier on. Just to reiterate though, the readings are WLTP rated at 298 miles for this top long range dual motor model. That's a figure that rises to 335 miles for the long range standard motor single motor variant, which shares the same 78 kilowatt hour battery. It's 273 miles for the base standard range standard motor single motor base model, which uses a smaller 64 kilowatt hour battery. As usual with the EVs though, these official figures require the driving style of Miss Marple if you're going to emulate them, plus an absence of frosty conditions and a complete avoidance of motorways, although you will get closer if most of your time is spent in urban areas. Exercise the motors with any kind of regular abandon, and on the basis of our experience, you'll do well to get much more than around 200 miles out of a single charge, whichever Polestar 2 variant you end up choosing. You can thank this Swedish contender's portly 2,123 kilo curb weight for that. Even to achieve that kind of range figure, you're going to need to make plenty of use of the one pedal drive feature, which maximizes regenerative braking. Polestar says it hopes to improve battery performance over time with over-the-air system updates, but at first glance you'd think it might need more than that to get this car's range figures up to match the best possible readings that you get from this EV's closest two arch rivals. After all, the magazines will tell you that Tesla's Model 3 in long range form can take you up to 360 miles between charges, and that a base BMW i4 eDrive 40 manages a similar figure, 367 miles. But as usual, the magazines haven't bothered to read the small print. For a start, the eDrive 40 version of the BMW only manages that figure because it doesn't have four-wheel drive, even though it costs around £8,000 more than this dual motor Polestar 2. And if you don't need four-wheel drive, and therefore you'd be looking at the entry-level standard range plus rear-driven version of the Tesla Model 3, the 278 mile range of that American car in that form is basically the same as you get from a comparably priced standard range standard motor Polestar 2, and it's actually 57 miles less than the long range standard motor Polestar 2 variant, which would only cost you £3,000 more. So food for thought. Obviously there are other rivals in the segment. The closest one to what's on offer here is probably Ford's Mustang Mach-E, the most directly comparable 75 kilowatt hour standard range version of which is very similar to a Polestar 2 in terms of price and drive range. A standard range Mach-E manages up to 273 miles in rear-driven form or 248 miles with all-wheel drive. Unlike Polestar, Ford does also offer the option of a larger extended range 98 kilowatt hour battery that'll take you further, but that of course costs quite a lot more. We'd also suggest that a Polestar 2 customer might also like to look at the Kia EV6, also comparably priced and featuring a 77.4 kilowatt hour battery, which manages decent range figures up to 314 miles in two-wheel drive form or 326 miles in four-wheel drive. The same engineering is shared by another similarly priced Korean, Hyundai's Ioniq 5, and that in comparable 73 kilowatt hour form manages up to 300 miles when it's rear driven or up to 287 miles with four-wheel drive. Otherwise, at this price point, you'll need to get yourself an electric vehicle which looks rather more overtly like an SUV. And if you wanted that, Polestar thinks that you'd be more likely to choose all the same engineering that you get here, clothed beneath the panelwork of a Volvo XC40, which in pure electric all-wheel drive form will take you up to 260 miles. Two other premium all-wheel drive crossover contenders at this price point are the Tesla Model Y, which in performance dual motor form manages 280 miles, and the Audi Q4 e-tron, which in 50 Quattro guise manages 295 miles. You would need to find around £15,000 more than Polestar requires here if you were to choose an Audi e-tron Sportback 50 Quattro at 215 miles or a BMW iX3 at 285 miles, and around £20,000 more if you were to choose either a Mercedes EQC at 259 miles or a Jaguar I-Pace at 300 miles. Now, if you've switched off during that little rundown, you can rejoin us now with the news that overall, although we'd like this car's range returns to be slightly better, it delivers a pretty class competitive showing. So time to move on to issues of charging, a whole new regime to get used to for a lot of likely customers. Polestar reckons it's merely about a change of mindset in the way that you think about fuel. So instead of driving to a fuel station to refill an empty tank, electric cars, the brand says, redefine parking time as charging time. Now that's great in theory, as long as the parking location you need enables you to plug in. And there, of course, is the biggest EV issue, particularly for UK customers, our nation's awful public charging infrastructure. Now, Polestar CEO Thomas Ingelath says he's impatient and annoyed that European nations like Britain are still struggling with basics like this. Access to electricity should be open to all, he says. There needs to be a universal system. Well, we wouldn't argue with that, but the reality is that there really isn't one. And unlike rivals Tesla, Polestar doesn't have its own brand network of charging stations to take up the slack. Until that changes, quite a few potential Polestar 2 customers might regretfully turn instead to a Model 3. So let's get to charging times for this Swedish EV, which are much the same with both this car's battery sizes. The Polestar 2 has an 11 kilowatt capacity AC onboard charger and a DC charge capability of up to 150 kilowatts. All models come with a Type 2 charging cable along with a 3-pin home charging cable as well. As usual with EV manufacturers, Polestar charging headlines refer to the kind of 150 kilowatt rapid public charger that you'll hardly ever come across. One of those will charge this car's 78 kilowatt hour battery, or more accurately the 75 kilowatt part of it that can be charged to 80% in 40 minutes. You're much more likely to come across a 50 kilowatt public charger, and that'll take an hour and 20 minutes to do the same thing. A feebler 11 kilowatt charger needs 6 hours and 20 minutes, so make sure when you're out and about you know about what you're plugging into. Most of the time, of course, you're going to be charging at home. You'll need to get a 7 kilowatt wall box installed in your garage if you haven't got one already. Polestar partners with PodPoint for that, and at the time of this test in autumn 2021, that kind of wall box could be installed for £529. Using one of these 7 kilowatt boxes, an 80% charge will take 9 hours and 40 minutes. Delve deeper into the small print and you'll find that a feebler 3.7 kilowatt supply will take 19 hours and 10 minutes, and then a normal domestic 3-pin 220 volt socket will require a yawning 32 hours. You can, of course, set charging times using the central screen or set them remotely using the Polestar app. This car has an efficiency rate of 3.2 miles for every kilowatt hour of energy it uses. At typical energy rates, a full charge from empty will probably cost you around about £10, which over a typical 12,000 mile annual commute would add around £540 to your home energy bill if you did all your charging at home. To give you a combustion comparison, an Audi S5 Sportback with similar performance to this dual motor Polestar 2 would cost around £1,700 to fuel over the same mileage. On the move in this Polestar, a readout to the right of the instrument cluster briefs you on battery charge next to a power meter gauge that shows whether you're using charge or you're regenerating it. Plus, the huge portrait screen in the center of the dash has a drive performance menu option, and that graphically shows kilowatt hours per 100 mile energy usage in high, normal and low segments with both instant and average readouts, so you can monitor your ongoing progress in frugality. What none of this will of course really tell you is your actual real life overall contribution to the environmental planet zeitgeist in driving this car. No EV is really zero emission. The energy to drive it has to come from somewhere, and sure enough, if you take current UK electricity power generation figures into account, this Polestar delivers a well-to-wheels CO2 contribution of 37.2 grams per kilometre. What about servicing? Well, courtesy of Polestar, it'll be free for the first 3 years of ownership, or for the first 31,250 miles, whichever comes around first. Go to the car status section of the central screen to see how close you're getting to a garage visit, or simply wait for the car to advise you. When a service is due, you can book that appointment online or via the Polestar app. A driver will come to you to collect the car, and the vehicle will be returned to you within a few hours, although courtesy cars can be arranged on request. The bill that you get should be cheaper than it would be for a comparable combustion model, and that's because there will be fewer consumables to replace, although do remember that with an EV, tyre wear tends to be a bit heavier, but that'll be balanced out by the fact that you'll hardly ever have to replace the brake pads, and that's thanks to that one pedal drive regen system. Right, a few more final cost of ownership details. Like all EVs, the Polestar 2 is exempt from road tax, and business users will benefit from a 1% benefit in kind taxation rate, and it's only 2% for the subsequent 2 years, all of which at the time of this test meant that a 40% taxpayer would get a BIK bill of £165 for the 2021 to 2022 tax year, which of course is massively less than you'd have to find for a comparable combustion model. What else? Well, a bit disappointingly for a brand looking to change convention, there's the usual 3-year 60,000 mile warranty, but the battery is covered by its own 8-year 100,000 mile deal. There's 12 years of anti-corrosion cover. Insurance, well, for the base standard range standard motor 64 kilowatt hour version, it's Group 34E. For the 78 kilowatt hour long range standard motor, the single motor variant, that's Group 35E. For this more powerful 78 kilowatt hour long range dual motor all wheel drive model, it's up at Group 42E. You'll also want to know about likely residuals, this being still a relatively unknown brand, but fear not on that score. Industry experts predict that across the range, this car should retain up to 60% of its original value after 36 months and 60,000 miles, and that's pretty near top of the class. Polestar is keen to emphasise the efforts it's made towards environmental sustainability as a brand. That's of course a key part of the company's ongoing operations, and it's worth mentioning here because it's likely that part of the reason that you all have wanted an EV like this one in the first place is to make your own contribution towards a reduction in pollution and global warming. Now, Polestar is at the forefront of this change in vehicle manufacturing, and the company plans to create its first carbon neutral car by 2030. The Swedish maker's other short-term ambitions include a 25% reduction of CO2 emissions related to global supply chain by 2025 and a 25% reduction in carbon emissions generated by its overall operations, including car production and logistics. In partnership with Volvo, Polestar is implementing global traceability for the cobalt used in its batteries. Traceability of the raw materials used in the production of lithium-ion batteries is one of the main sustainability challenges that's faced by car makers. The Swedish maker is committed to full traceability, and by applying blockchain technology, its customers can drive electrified Polestars knowing that the cobalt for the batteries has been sourced responsibly. We'd also suggest that a Polestar 2 customer might like to look at a Kia EV6, also comparably priced and featuring a 77.4 kilowatt hour battery that manages decent range figures, up to 328 miles in two-wheel drive form or up to 314 with four-wheel drive. We like the Polestar 2, and it couldn't be more different from arguably its closest rival, the Tesla Model 3. That's an EV that slightly awkwardly embraces the current eco-zeitgeist. This Polestar, in contrast, feels resolutely normal, and it represents a far easier transition to battery mobility for someone currently in a 3 Series, a C-Class or an A4. In that respect, it's really more like a BMW i4. Like that Bavarian EV, this one would ideally weigh a lot less and go a lot further on a single charge, as future Polestar products hopefully will. The Model 3 currently trounces this car in both those areas, and it comes with the advantage of a more prolific own brand public charging network. Despite all that though, if you can live with this car's caveats, you may find it difficult to resist the unique styling, the classy cabin, and the surprisingly evolving drive dynamics all play in its favour. Yes, it is easy to sneer at Polestar's environmental mission statement to drive progress and create a better future, a future that's sustainable, hassle-free and strikingly beautiful. But we can't help liking the way that this car has delivered its electric remit with Volvo-style pragmatism. There's no big fuss about superbike-style acceleration times or about how it can charge in next to no time from rapid charging stations that you'll hardly ever come across. It doesn't even mess about with a pointless SUV configuration. Instead, the Polestar 2 simply gets on with delivering what is arguably the most complete EV experience in the £40,000 to £50,000 price bracket. It has a Tesla-like feel of innovation, a Mercedes EQC-like feel of quality, and a Jaguar I-Pace-like feel of sporting purpose, all with rare, unique branding and packaging. Choosing one of these would be a step into the unknown, but we can see why you might.